McCree, but a new injury news for the Cowboys. And some big NBA games tonight as the NBA in-season tournament continues. We get a Spurs game and a Mavericks game, and we'll maybe even talk some James Harden, because isn't it always fun to talk about James Harden here on the Sports Complex? And of course, your text, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776 is the text line number. If you guys want to join the conversation, you want to talk some Texas football, you want to talk some Texas basketball, some NBA, some NFL, Cowboys, Texans, whatever you got for us, send those texts in, 512-447-3776. We'll give you the big fat poll of the day in a little bit, but we're going to keep it rolling through here on the Sports Complex till 7 o'clock right here on the Horn. Appreciate everybody joining us again here as we get closer to the holidays. I hope everybody's got their plans ready. I did not realize until today that Thanksgiving was next week. Complete shocker there. And I looked and I really thought there was another week in between when right now and then when Thanksgiving was. And then I looked on the calendar today and realized it was next week, which makes sense. If we have Iowa State and then Texas Tech, I should have made that correlation that it was next week. But for whatever reason in my brain, I thought there was another week in there. So now I'm trying to figure out, now I'm just in my head. I have to reset the schedule because I'm completely thrown off of everything. I'm sure that's happened to some other people around here too. When you just forget what day of the week it is when you're working, you're just kind of rolling along, and then all of a sudden you forget that there's a holiday coming up. Let's talk some Texas football here. And this is something that I kind of want to reset. So yesterday we talked a lot about Texas TCU, and there was a lot of people very upset, like we were on Saturday with the comeback, and the fact that Texas once again could not close out a game. The fact that Texas looked like it was going to be smooth sailing, looked like they could get that style points victory that we've all been wanting to try and move up and keep any hope alive that you might be able to make that college football playoff, which those odds are dwindling more and more when you see Florida State winning and Oregon winning and Washington winning. Everybody winning kind of makes those odds seem a longer shot. But for Texas, you watch those games and you say, man, why can't you just get it done, and why can't you handle it? And there's plenty of issues. We know that the red zone scoring has been a problem. We know that there's been issues of Sark being too aggressive and then too conservative. We know that the creativity and play calling that we were all hoping for at points seems to disappear, and everything seems to be a little bit easier, and it's a little bit more old school football and not so much the new school where you see motion and you see trying to distract and confuse, and you don't see the weapons being used at the rate you'd like to see them used on the offensive end. On the defensive end, you see where the conservatism pushes back and you don't have the pass rush that you'd like to have and continuing to bring pressure. You play off of some wide receivers a little bit more. You continue to say, if they don't beat us over the top, we're going to be fine. We can't get beat over the top. Even though in some of those games you got beat over the top, you were still able to win those games against better teams. I understand that that's something you want to try and work on and get better, and you hope that your team continues to progress in that way. But overall, Texas is still 9-1, which pretty good for this season, pretty good for Texas. They're on the right path. This is also something of growing pains of getting to be where you win the close ones. Sometimes you have to be able to win the close ones before you learn how to then fully close out the game. Sark talked about closing out games yesterday, and there's a couple different clips of this, but Sark talked about closing out the games. And for Texas fans, I think that's probably the most stomach-churning, mind-boggling. Why is it so hard that we can enjoy everything in the game? And again, I'll tell you, if you haven't rewatched TCU, and I know you don't all rewatch games and you don't want to rewatch, just rewatch the first half. And just rewatch the first half to say, okay, this is the Texas team we know is there, because I feel like a lot of people, you're walking away with a bad taste in your mouth, forgetting that this team can still do the things and put up 19 points in a quarter and look really good like they did in that second quarter. And they didn't look bad in the first quarter, but they looked really good in the second quarter. They had those spurts of points, but they need to be able to close out games. Here's Sark talking about closing out games and Texas kind of needing to figure out how to close out these games a little bit better.
Yeah, well, I think they're different. You go the Kansas State game, How did they get back in the game? We gave them the ball inside our own 20-yard line twice, right? I mean, and we got a punt blocks. And so we gave them a short field. They were able to score quickly. This game, they were getting play yards in chunks, and they were able to get down the field and score. But how do you get back into a game when you're behind by 20 points? You get quick scores. And so we have to minimize their ability to score quickly on defense, but yet still remain aggressive. We can't let people get comfortable, and I think that we let them get comfortable. On the flip side, offensively, we have to possess the ball. And how do you possess it? One, you don't turn it over. Two, you extend drives on third down. And turnovers 2 weeks ago, not converting third downs the other night, third and makeables, third 1, 2, and 3s. I mean, that's what you ask for as a coach. And to go 2 for 8 in those scenarios, that's not good enough. We need to have a better plan, and then we need to execute the plan better.
Yeah, and then start with one. You need a better plan. Those third down, the second half, running the ball over and over and not getting into positions where you thought you were going to win, taking your quarterback completely out of rhythm. Now, I still am not sure 100% Quinn had a full arm in that second half of the game. It did not appear to me that he had the throwing arm that he was going to be able to do what he needed to do. I still think you could have thrown intermediate passes, but Sark talked about there. You can't turn the ball over. So for Texas, you have to be able to figure out what can you do that you no longer, that the practices don't matter, that whatever you think is the scheme in the second half and what your plans are, what's your idea of how to make this game, how to make the second half go by, you may have to alter that in course for Sark. And that's where Sark seems to be lacking, is he said, I'm going to run the ball the entire second half. And as things started to fall apart, he continued with that plan, and he gets away with it because he gets a win, which works, which is great. But the same part, that's not good enough. That can't be good enough. You have to continue to evolve and grow, because as you start to play better teams, if you win these last 2 games, which Iowa State's going to be coming for you, and you know going to Ames, Iowa, that Iowa is going to come after you. And you know that going to Iowa, Iowa State is always a tough play at home. So that's going to be a tough one. You know, Texas Tech wants to ruin your season. They're a spoiler. That's what they want to do. They spoiled Kansas's season this week. That's what Texas Tech wants to do. And then you're going to go to the Big 12 championship game if you win both of those, and then you're going to have another team. And now you're going to have Brett Yormark sitting in the crowd hoping that you lose. There's going to be a lot going in where you're going to have to learn how to close out these games. And sometimes you need to close them out by not trying to just close out games at the start of the second half. And I feel Texas too many times in this season has walked out of the huddle, walked out of the tunnel in the third quarter trying to close out a game. And you're not near closeout time. You are no longer foot on the gas, so you score no points or 3 points in the third quarter, and now you are allowing all momentum to change. The crowd, especially on the road, gets back into it, and there is no aggressiveness because you're just trying to run out 2 full quarters of time, which is craziness. So you have to be able to pick and choose when you still need to be aggressive. Now, you don't want 3 and outs. I get that. Now, you don't want to throw the ball and not run any time and allow the other teams all the time in the world. But they don't need the time. And I think that's where Sark keeps missing. Is Sark, none of these games have ended because the teams ran out of time, really. It was because, and I mean, you could say, yes, Texas was able to run the clock out. But K-State scored when they needed to quickly enough. TCU scored when they needed to quickly enough. So if you don't have that, you need to find a new way and a new motive to come out in that third quarter and try to put on more points and try to escalate the lead even more, so that if you get down that fourth quarter, there's 2 things that can happen when you build out the lead in the third quarter. There's 2 things. One, you have a bigger lead, so even if they do put up 14 quick points, you're up 28, and it's not that big of a deal. We're all still upset, but it's not that big of a deal. And 2, you demoralize the team. But you allow them to go in the locker room, regain themselves, and then come out and have a moral victory of the entire second half, which allows them to come back and play. You know, when you watch the other teams that are in the college football playoff and in that top 10 ranking right now, a lot of those teams, what they do is they come out in the third quarter and put their foot on the throat, and they go for it. And when they do that, it demoralizes the other team enough that by the time the coach just wants to get out of there, the team just wants to get out of there. And I get the Big 12, it's a little bit hard to do for a lot of these teams. They have a lot of pride. They want to go out there and play. But when you make them feel like they're even with you for a full quarter, that fourth quarter becomes a lot easier. So Sark talked about then well, how do you practice closing out games? Because if this is the problem, if we know this is a big thing and you're practicing and you're trying to fix certain stuff, how do you practice closing out games? Sark doesn't really have a great answer, but here's what he said.
I think that we try to have competitive practices. We try to put them in those scenarios, good on good type scenarios of making those plays, doing your job in competitive settings at critical moments. And then 2 is having a real understanding of the plan of what we're doing and why we're trying to do those specific things. But I do think us having those competitive settings in practice, the sudden changes, the third down competitions, the good on good team runs, the good on good 7-on-7 periods, allows our players to feel comfortable. Team shines through, but I think a lot of that versatility gets built in practice, right? Those competitive settings and understanding that this is why we practice the way we practice, so that we're comfortable in that setting when it presents itself.
So they practice it. I get it. You do that, but that's not. Being competitive in practice isn't really the issue. Being put in a position, I don't know how much you practice is. Okay, we're going to put you guys in a prevent defense. We're going to put you in just the lamest defense possible, and then we're going to give them a bunch of really good plays against you, and we're just going to let them go and see if you can stop that. And then if Sark can see that and go, oh, well, this doesn't ever work. We can practice it all day long. We can practice this all day long. It doesn't do anything because it's a bad game plan. And this is what you used to do when teams only ran the ball. This is what you used to do 25 years ago when the game was a running game, not a throwing game. And yes, you still run the ball clearly, but now there is so much more passing and the rules are made for better passing. And if you're not able to create that pass rush constantly and knowing that the offensive line is probably not going to get a lot of holding calls late in the game. So if you're trying to go organic pressure 5-on-4 and they're able to hold, which we're able to too. I'm not saying it's an unfair advantage. I'm saying that that's just kind of how the game's called. It takes a lot to get a holding call these days. So if you know that, then why would you consistently put yourself in a situation that there is no real winnable? The winnable thing is we just happened to get out of there in time. We had a big enough lead going into it. That's where Texas needs to start figuring it out. And now this is the flip of that, though. I think defensively, it's easy. You just keep bringing more pressure. You take the odds of a shot over the top. You try and play your safeties a little bit deeper, but you don't worry as much about playing that off defense. You go out there and you try to make good plays and you trust your defense. And now if you get beat up, you may have to change a little bit. We know there's been games with injuries they've been beat up. On the offensive end, you are very beat up now. Because you are very beat up in the fact that Jonathan Brooks is out. And I think C.J. Baxter and Jaden Blue, and we can play some clips of that, I think those guys can do a lot. I think there's potential on those guys. I don't think any of them are at the level that Jonathan Brooks is right now or was going into this week. I think that Jonathan Brooks was on a higher level because he was on a higher level than most of college football. So he was on a very high level, right? So we say Jonathan Brooks is on this very high level, then we know that you have to take a step down. We saw it in the Washington Bowl game. I don't think it'll be that bad. This is where we could see Keelan Robinson, who did not play a ton this year, maybe start getting some more reps as well. We know C.J. Baxter is going to get a ton more reps, but he's going to have to come off the field because we have seen he gets beat up in the course of a game. Jaden Blue is going to have to come in these games now, and he's been great in the moments he's been in, but those have been at the end of games. So now, okay, your running game is somewhat beat up. On the flip of that, you have a quarterback that did not, to my eyes, look like a quarterback who was fully healthy in the second half of that game. He looked okay in the first half. Second half, he looked pretty beat up. And everybody's going to be coming for him. You kept him pretty clean during the game, but you're still going to take some shots. You also now have lost that kind of extra run ability. The more he is protecting himself, the less he's actually going to be able to run the ball. So now you have to start looking at the running versus the passing game plan, especially at the end of games. And when you get into that third quarter where you should still be playing like it's the first quarter, you should still be playing all gas, no breaks in the third quarter. But once you start getting into that fourth quarter, then, well, how do you decide when it's time to run the ball, when it's time to pass the ball, when it's time to run, when it's time to pass? That is starting to be the question for Sark because Sark feels like he wants to be all one way or all the other. And he wants to be an all-pass team that mixes in the run or an all-run team that mixes in the pass. And it kind of, I feel at this point in the season, might need to be a bit more 50-50 and not so much deep balls, because we all know there's other passes you can make that aren't screens and aren't deep balls. There's other passes in the arsenal, and he's hit them at time to time, and they seem to work at a good rate. Here's Sark talking about the running game versus the passing game plan.
We go into every game doing what we think we need to do to win the game. And then in game, we make adjustments predicated on what we think we need to do to win the game. The other night in the fourth quarter, when they were scoring so fast and I felt like the momentum had really slipped out of our hands, I got the ball and basically said, we're going to run it every down. And if we get a field goal, we get a field goal. If we score, we score. But we're going to slow this game down. We're going to get momentum back on our side. And I knew how big that field goal was for us in that moment to make that thing, the two-score game that it became. And so you go in with a plan, and we're more than comfortable if the plan needs to be that we need to throw it around. We're more than capable. Our offensive line's more than capable. Quinn's more than capable. Obviously, receiving core, tight ends, things of that nature. But every game is different, right, of how people are going to try to defend us and what we need to do, and then making those adjustments in game to ensure that that we're putting our team in the best position to win. And that doesn't, sometimes that's not always the sexiest thing to do, to try to win the game. But ultimately, when the dust settles and stats and everything, man, there's one stat that matters the most. Is it a W or an L? And we're just keep trying to stack W's.
And he is stacking W's right now. So we can't critique him too much, because there is a fact that this is a guy who, was more aggressive at points and lost games last year. Now, there's a different team. I think he's got it more prepared. I think he's doing a lot of things right. But you would like to see this team be a bit more aggressive when it comes to second-half play calling. And not second-half play calling when they're down, but second-half play calling when they're up, when they have a good lead, and when they go into halftime, and when they come out of that half and come out with power and aggressiveness. And I feel like there's too many times this season that he has gone in, come out, tried to go deep early in the second half. It doesn't work, and he basically shuts the system down. It says, all right, well, we know we didn't really get that big play, and that was the plan, so let's just keep sticking to the plan until it's over. Let's stick with the plan until it's too late. And it feels like it's always just right on that line of too late this season. And they're 9-1, so we can say it's worked enough. It's worked enough, but it feels like a very precarious position to sit in. It feels like a precarious position to sit in when you're trying to campaign to see if maybe another team loses, to see maybe if that Big 12 title win, to see if maybe a 12-1 team can get into the college football playoff. The one loss may have done it. We know that. But can you get a 10-1 season? Can you get an 11-1 season? Can you win the Big 12 and can be 12-1? And make people decide on that, as opposed to dropping another one of these trap games, dropping another one of these games because you were trying to be safe. And I think this is part of the growth of year 3, but also it's so close. But this is kind of where I want to get to Patrick's Big Fat Poll today.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the day on the Horn.
512-447-3776 is the text line number. So here's a big fat poll of the day. I've talked to some friends, and every time I start to get upset, there is a part of me that now knows this is a Texas team that is honestly probably overperformed this season. And it's hard to say that because the games, it doesn't feel like they're winning them outright. It feels like they're kind of getting by. But in reality, when you go back and watch some of these games, you did. And then, maybe play calling wasn't there, maybe a misplay. But this is a good team. This is a really good team that seems to be ahead of schedule, or at least on schedule, but ahead. So poll of the day is, has Texas underperformed, overperformed, or been on track with your expectations, with your prediction at the beginning of this season? Not now, but before the season started, have they underperformed, overperformed, or are they right on track and they're right where they want to be? And we can bounce off of that. Do you think they're going to continue to overperform? Do you think this is a 12-win team? Do you think they can go ahead and keep performing at that level? If they do, are you out of your mind? Are you still on an incomplete because you still don't trust them? Because if you think it's an incomplete, that's that may be that a 9-win team is not good enough. A 10-win is a double-digit win in a Big 12 playoff championship. So the text line's open, 512-447-3776. And it's all kind of going into this, how to judge this season while we're still in it, knowing how well they've done this so far this season, knowing that they are 9-1, knowing they have some big wins, knowing that their one loss wasn't even a blowout, knowing that it was a game you could have won, which is painful, but it is what it is. So knowing all of those things, have they underperformed, overperformed, or are they right on track with you? And if you have that, do you think, okay, this is a team that could compete at the next step? If there was to be some crazy outcome at the end of this season where whatever happens and Ohio State loses too, or Oregon and Washington both losing and get knocked out, and Florida State loses and gets knocked out. One of those scenarios, and Texas is able to creep in to that number 4 spot. Is that a team that can compete for you? Is this a team that you feel could compete in that level? I didn't say win the national championship, saying compete. Saying it's a team that if they got there, you would not say, crap, we're in over our head. Send that in the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll get to some of your texts. We'll get some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. And we'll keep the sports complex rolling here on the Horn, 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com, and also back on YouTube. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn on a Tuesday afternoon, playing you some interesting cover songs is the musical theme of the week. This is Paul Anka doing Nirvana. So just another one of those fun ones. And I know there's some other guys that do some similar stuff, but this was an interesting one I've heard. Paul Anka doing rock covers. Just putting that swing in Nirvana. Always good to see. Where the text line's open, 512-447-3776. Big fat poll of the day. Texas underperformed, overperformed, been right on track with your expectations, your prediction at the beginning of the season. And if you want to add on to that, you feel like adding a little bit more for us, you want to talk some more Texas football with us. If you believe that this is a team that could go on and compete, do you think this is a team that will go on and keep winning? Is this a team that can go on and compete? Put all that stuff in there in the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. Appreciate everybody participating on the text line. I do extra week when I was talking about having the extra week that I thought there was one in between this week and Thanksgiving week. Extra week was a Horns D late. That is, I need a rim shot for that. I need to add a rim shot to my hotkeys page for that. Solid joke there, Texter. Solid joke. West Texas Andy says, quit letting Taft play, please. I think Taft is doing okay at some of the stuff that he does. There is a point, and it's the rotation of the defense, especially early in the season, was working really well of keeping guys fresh and keeping guys where they could make big plays down the stretch. I don't know how much of that is to injuries, how much of that is slowing down because of just situationally, and they don't want to have those people put out as much as they do. But it is, I don't think Taft playing is as big of a problem as some people do. He can get beat. So there is points where late in the game, you may not want to have him in. If you're playing the let's not let them beat us over the top defense, then he may not be the guy to have in there. But I think there is points of the game where he is very valuable to have in the game. Mark from Taylor says, Texas has made its one-loss bed. And Patrick, does Texas feel like a college football playoff team? Do you be honest? Yes, it does. And I'll tell you why. It's because I don't value, like, the college football playoff is what it is. And if you look around the league and what they are, I think Texas can compete with Florida State. I think they compete with Oregon. I think they could compete with Washington. So if I'm saying those are the teams that are right there, I think they can compete with Ohio State. I think they could compete with a lot of these teams. Now, Georgia, I don't know. Michigan, I don't know. But I think there's a lot of those teams they could compete with. Now, do they win? That's the question you see on game day. If, it depends also on Quinn Ewers' health, because if he's healthier, it makes a big difference of what Texas can do. But I do think they can compete with those teams. So if they can compete with some of the top teams in there, then I do think they're a college football playoff team. Because I think there's a difference of playing this style when you're up 14, 21, whatever it is, and then you start to play conservatively and everything starts to go downhill versus the games where they're in it the whole time and playing rough the whole time. I think there's a different mindset and different plan that Sark goes in with. So I don't necessarily compare what K-State or TCU did coming back on Texas as the same thing as a hard fought, we know this is a battle to the end, as opposed to maybe they took their foot off the gas, or they did take their foot off the gas kind of game. And 9-1 is awesome, but we look like TCU last year. We don't look fully like TCU because TCU was coming from behind all last year. You remember, Adams, if we want to be correct about this, TCU came from behind all season. TCU were the comeback kings last season. We're not coming from behind. We're letting everybody come up on us. Big difference, because Texas is showing that they can be the dominant team and then falling off when they start to play conservative. They're no good at playing conservative. They're good at playing aggressive. And I mean, he's 9-1. 9-1. We can't say that clearly Sark is doing everything wrong. Clearly, I mean, he's 9-1. You can't say, I don't think you can say that a coach at doing 9-1 is clearly a bad coach. That's silly to me. So we can't critique him, but I don't want to critique him to the point of saying I could run this team better than him. That's what I'm saying. And overperformed record, but not impressively. No, they do have overperformed record, but you're being picky. You're being picky about your wins. And it's when you watch enough other college football, this is how college football works for the most part. You do have some bad wins, but the BYU win, you went in there and handled your business. TCU, Kansas State, games that you've always had troubles with, you came in and played well enough. So I don't have that problem with that as much. I mean, I appreciate you texting in, Mark. I appreciate it. I'm not as negative as you are on this one. Floor this season was to get to Arlington from Joe H. So the floor was this. And I think that was around the floor. I think you really wanted to be in that game. You wanted to have a double-digit win season, which seems like it'll happen unless you lose 2 at the end. And then, of course, we'll all say, well, what a terrible collapse. But a double-digit win season is winning one of the last 2. And if you win one of the last 2, you're probably still in that Big 12 playoff game, but you'd like to win your last 2 games, be an 11-win team going in. And then, yeah, I think you're really in there. Lucas says, expectation is on par. I took Sark for his word on the Big 12 championship. College football playoff is overperformed for sure. Yes, I agree. And yeah, if you get to the college football playoff, you overperform. But that's the reality. The difference between the Big 12 championship and the college football playoff isn't really that far. And that's what Sark knew all along, is you got to have some other breaks, which don't seem like they're going to happen this year. But other than that, you did what you need to do to be in the position that in several other years, you're in that college football playoff. I do want to play you some sound from Hook 'em Up, talking some more about Sark, talking some more about his game plan and what he's doing to try and fix these gaps at the end and fix these collapses and fix just the fourth quarter and playing 4 quarters. Here's Ian Robbie, weekday morning, 6 to 11. Text line's open. We're going to come back and do some of that in about 6 minutes.
But, of course, he was talking about the Iowa State Cyclones, their upcoming opponent. They have to go on the road, true road game for the Longhorns. Haven't had many of those outside the state of Texas. Only one, actually. That was Alabama, and the Longhorns won that one. Let's talk about the Iowa State Cyclones. Here from Steve Sarkisian talking about the Longhorns' upcoming contest this weekend.
Like we've been saying all along, as far as this week's ball game, this is another Big 12 championship game for us. We put ourselves in this position over a month ago, and we've accepted the challenge, and I think our guys have responded to that. We understand we're gonna go into another hostile environment, Saturday night. And it's going to take all 70 players that we bring and coaches, to play as one. And to go play a good football team who has gotten better as the year has gone on. Obviously, a very well-coached team. These guys do a great job of taking care of the ball on offense, creating turnovers on defense. I think they have 15 interceptions on the year, so the ball is going to play a big factor in this game. We've got to find a way to get it off of them. We got to take care of it on our end, and then we need to be efficient offensively with the number of possessions that could come out of this game. So a lot of work to do on a Monday, but again, a lot of respect for Iowa State, and we know it's going to take a great effort from us to try to come get a win.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Iowa State's going to give Texas everything they can handle, and this team has shown the last few weeks that they have a tendency to have a lapse and have kind of lulls in the second half, and they allow teams to get back in games. So whether Iowa State's going to be in this game all throughout it or they're going to be down double digits and have to come back, I think we can expect a fourth quarter game. And Texas has been really good in winning these fourth quarter games. Speaking of 4 quarters, not the fourth quarter, Sark was asked, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is my man, I think it's Anwar who asked a question about the 4 quarters. But basically, Sark was asked about why doesn't this team play a complete game for 4 quarters of football, and when was the last time he was satisfied with this team playing 4 full quarters of football? I thought the response was interesting from Sark. Here it is.
I don't know. I'm more focused on how we're going to improve. And I don't know if I'm ever satisfied. I mean, I don't know. I've never met a coach who was satisfied after a game. There's always room to improve. And so, to think we're going to go play a perfect game Saturday night, probably not going to happen. But I'm going to keep pushing our guys and be demanding of them to improve. And I'm going to be demanding of our coaches to improve. There's no time for us to sit back and accept it, And so I don't know when exactly that last time was. There's never been a game where I've gone in on a Monday morning and didn't have corrections to make, and so that's the challenge. Every week there's different things where we can improve as a team, and that this week that is of the utmost importance for us.
Strikes me definitely frustration in his tone.
Sure,
I don't know.
Sure, I think you are.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know. It goes back to what I said about 3 weeks ago. I think he's accepted it now too, unfortunately, and I think that's what that frustration was. Like they are who they are.
But I do think, as we've talked
We're gonna
about,
we're gonna try to prove.
You
But
told
they are
Longhorn fans to just accept it. I think Sark has been expecting them. Okay, guys, I'm going to cover for
Take
you
the
on
next
this.
step.
I'll take
Yeah.
it. You know, we're. But now we got to play 4 quarters, and he knows it's going to beat him at some point. It may be this
He
week,
knows.
it may be the Big 12 championship game,
Yeah.
but the inability to avoid those lulls. And I played the cut in the headlines, Rod, where he was said it's unacceptable, and he cited 3 different things in the fourth quarter. Their mental intensity focus, they weren't as aggressive on defense, and at some level kind of cited Pete Kwiatkowski just on the calls, where we were calling the defenses tight. But did we lay back? And because we're playing the lead, Rod, you don't want to give up a big play, but instead they were giving up chunk plays because they were giving up short plays that turned into big plays because they weren't tackling people. And then he cited the fact Sark wants to be able to pound the rock in 3rd and 2 and 3 when the opposing team knows we're running, and Texas couldn't convert first downs and keep the chains moving just on the ground. Remember, they did that at Alabama to close out that game where they were able to run for first downs, and they weren't able to do that. Longhorn fans were frustrated because he was being conservative. Sark was challenging his team, hey, we should be able to get
physical.
3rd and 2 here.
Yeah, let's close it out. You're right.
Make
Put
a
the nail in
block.
the coffin.
And let's be honest, I think we're getting to the point where Texas guard to guard, I think they're good at tackle, Rod, but I think guard to guard they struggle
Great
to get
at
push.
tackle.
And that's why, I know you'll do the analytics, but their numbers to the outside in that game were pretty incredible. But the numbers between the tackles were not good, and that's what they were trying to do in that fourth quarter.
Speaking of closing out games, Sark was asked about closing out games. It's a great point you just brought up there. And here's Sark, and this is part of the cut you played earlier, I believe. Here's Sark talking about the inability for Texas to close out games lately and how they need to get that killer instinct.
Yeah, well, I think they're different. You go the Kansas State game. How did they get back in the game? We gave them the ball inside our own 20-yard line twice, right? And we got a pump blocks. And so we gave them a short field. They were able to score quickly. This game, they were getting play yards in chunks, and they were able to get down the field and score. But how do you get back into a game when you're behind by 20 points? You get quick scores. And so we have to minimize their ability to score quickly on defense, but yet still remain aggressive. We can't let people get comfortable, and I think that we let them get comfortable. On the flip side, offensively, we have to possess the ball. And how do you possess it? 1, you don't turn it over. 2, you extend drives on 3rd down. And turnovers 2 weeks ago, not converting 3rd downs the other night, 3rd and makeables, 3rd 1, 2, and 3s. That's what you ask for as a coach. And to go 2 for 8 in those scenarios, that's not good enough. We need to have a better plan, and then we need to execute the plan better.
2 things about that, and he's right. I've been tracking it since the U of H game's last 4 games. He's talking about these chunk yardage plays. If you look at just inside cuts, inside breaking routes of any kind, teams the last 4 games averaging over 12 yards per attempt when they target an inside breaking route. Those are your chunk yardage plays, explosive play rates of over close to 30%. Same thing when they target bunch formation, cluster groups of receivers. You guys heard me talking about this last 4 games. Teams averaging over damn near 12 yards per attempt, over 11 yards per attempt when they're targeting bunch formation. These are the chunk plays he's talking about. It's fine if teams are getting yardage, but it'd be better if they had to put together double-digit drives that lasted more than 2.5 minutes. Shout out to my man Nash at Nash Talks Texas. He had this stat. Since the Oklahoma game, Texas has allowed 14 touchdowns. 10 of those drives were less than 2.5 minutes of game clock. They're scoring fast. That's how they get back in the game. You're only like, oh, Texas still has a double-digit lead going to the 4th. They're going to be fine. Well, if Texas can't get first downs, and then they're getting, chunk yardage, explosive plays, and they're getting down the field in 2.5 minutes and able to score, that formula right there is blowing up in Texas's face.
Yeah, they're so polar, man. As far as a
It's
team, they
unbelievable.
go from so dominant to what the heck.
They do. They go from wow to what the really quickly.
Real bad.
And they have it's the best of times and the worst of times in the same game. That's the crazy part about it. It's like, how's this happening in the same game? You think they have one game which is a bad game by them? They don't. They have great, spectacular stretches in the games, but they also in that same game, just like the yin and the yang, they're guaranteed to also have a lapse and a lull for, a few minutes in the game, and that often costs them, or at least it hasn't cost them yet, but it allows teams to get hope and breathe life into opposing teams.
Some good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. And the point of it hasn't cost them yet, but it may. But I'm asking you on the Big Fat Poll today, text line's open, 512-447-3776. Is Texas underperformed, overperformed, or right on track with your preseason expectations? Some of you, I think, are altering your expectations. I don't think some of you were this cocky last season, but we'll get into some more of these texts when we get back from the break. I want to get into that. If you think this team can compete, do you think this team, if they were put in a situation of getting into the college football playoff, that they would be able to compete? Text that in, 512-447-3776 is a text line. We're going to take a quick break. We come back, more of your text right here on the Sports Complex in the Horn, 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, hornfm.com, and back on YouTube. Back on the Sports Complex on a Tuesday afternoon. The musical theme of the week is interesting covers. This is John Cale doing Heartbreak Hotel. Keeping it weird here on a Tuesday afternoon. Text lines open 512-447-3776. Asking you if Texas has underperformed, overperformed, met your expectations, met your preseason predictions so far. They're 9-1. Haven't all these wins have not looked great? Have some good wins. They beat an Alabama team. They lost to an Oklahoma team. Think some of you may not be giving them credit for some of those things, but that's just me. This texter says under, but winning close games this year, and they would have lost them in previous years. I agree, and I don't know what your over was. They were an 8-5 team last year. To say they should have been undefeated is a bit crazy. Now you may say my prediction after Alabama. That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking before the entire season, before we knew what they could be against Alabama. Did they underperform, overperformer, or be right on schedule? My man, Chief Engineer. Always got some good stuff for you. He does bring up the thing they were talking about this morning on E&RB, the Bobby Bowden, that to take over a program, that this is where the Bobby Bowden schedule, year 3, is to win games close, but to start winning them. And year 2 was to lose games close, which is on the schedule. So year 4 would then be to start to take over and be that team. Now it depends on who is still going to be there. But yeah. He is on board with this, a lot of this, and protecting in the second half is you're supposed to protect in the last 4. I agree with you there. In the fourth quarter, in the second half of the fourth quarter, I agree with you there. It was well, Chief Engineer. He said, my concern is not the next 2 games. A little worried due to our recent history. Bigger concern for me is losing the Big 12 championship or getting smoked in a primetime big bowl game. Yeah, and the bowl game is always questionable too, because you don't know. This is a team with a lot of guys who plan to go pro. And if you're not in that college ball playoff, how many of them may skip a bowl game? And if you say you're going into a bowl game with no Quinn Ewers, no Xavier Worthy, no JT Sanders, no Jordan Whittington, and no Adonai Mitchell, no Byron Murphy, no Tavondre Sweat, no Jalen Ford, Jalen Catalon, like that could be a lot of players. So this big bowl game for Texas could end up being different depending on who decides to stay, who decides to go, who just wants to play in the game, and who doesn't want to. That's down the road though, because you still have to win 3 games to get to that big bowl game. So that is a definite one that you have to get on there. Appreciate you, Chief Engineer. Always appreciate you. On paper, this Texas team was supposed to win the Big 12 championship since preseason. The way they're playing, I'm not super confident facing any of the current top 4 teams, but Texas loves to play to their competition, and all of those teams are competition confident. We don't Oklahoma and get blown out. Ryan from Austin. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Texas has played to their competition. Now they've outplayed them for most of it. Then they've come back and had those guys come back and get scores on them at the end. But for the most part, Texas has actually done pretty good this season in those games, and then they just fall apart because they don't keep their foot on the gas. It seems like a much easier solution, and it's Sark being worried because 8-5 last year, because you were losing those close games, and you don't want to lose those games because he needs to stay on track to get where he wants to be. And so I get it, but it feels like you're leaving stuff on the table. You're leaving points on the table. You're leaving production on the table when you do that. Dexter says, underperforming in game planning. Only reason I say that is because of the second half performances. They did the same thing last year and still doing it. We just have more experience, depth, and talent now. We're also getting better leads. It's somewhat different than last season because last season, I don't know if they were getting the big enough leads. I think there were part of these games where they didn't really have the depth last season that they were taking their foot off the brake. I think they were more, and you did say depth. You had that in there, but I don't know if they were able to play 4 quarters at the level they need to play at. This season, they're doing it. They have the ability to do it, but they just pull off and they're not being aggressive enough. But I would not say they're underperforming. I would say underperforming in certain areas. In planning, their planning before the game is great. I think game planning, they're doing pretty well because they're coming out and doing really well and pushing a lot of these teams away. So I wouldn't say it's game planning. I'd say it's game adjustments and in-game adjustments, which is what Sark has had a problem with for quite some time. This texter is on the other side of the spectrum. A win is a win. 1 point or 40 points, it's still a win. Be happy we're winning. That's where I'm trying to find that middle ground. That's exactly, texter. I'm trying to find that middle ground of 9-1. This is a team that, to me, is overperforming what we thought they would be. That they beat an Alabama team that I didn't have them beating. I thought you could have beat Oklahoma, but that was a 10-second different game. That was the game you lost because you played too conservatively in the second half. And, you were in all of you're beating these other teams. And the losses are really bad when you only remember the bad part of the loss. And when you look at the end of the game, but you're outplaying the other team for more of the game. So yes, there is worry, there is stress. It's annoying. And I know everybody as a sports fan would like to have your team dominate. And Texas fans would love to see Texas come out and win by 40 every single game. I don't know if that's in the cards. I don't know next season if that will be in the cards either, because it depends on who comes and who stays, who goes. But I don't know if that's in the cards either. We got to take a break. When we come back, more of your text, 512-447-3776. We're getting into some NFL news. We'll get into some NBA talk as well, and keep going with your text. You guys drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails right here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com, and back on YouTube. Coming up here in hour 2 of the Sports Complex, we may play you some more sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B2, talking about Dak Prescott, talking about this Texas Coast offense and the Dallas Cowboys. Some positivity about the Dallas Cowboys there from the guys. So we always like to, a little positivity. It's Tuesday. You got to be on a positive. It's early in the week. We're getting there. We're almost in a holiday week next week, even though I didn't realize it was a holiday week next week. No one nice. See the years going, and then you just forget what time of year it is, and then you're already there, and now, we'll get there. We'll make it. We'll make it through the holiday season. Text line's open. 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776. The poll of the day is Texas underperformed, overperformed, or been on track with your preseason expectations and predictions. So let that be in. I know some of you guys may be changing the script on them, maybe making an in-game adjustments unlike Sark does. Maybe you're doing that. I get that. Do you think this team can compete in a college football playoff? Do you think they compete with some of the top teams in the country? If they were to get there, the pieces were to fall the way whatever way they fall, would the Texans have a shot? Can they compete in that? Can they do that? It's close. They have the talent and coaching to be dominant in each game. I think they should. I wouldn't say use the word dominant. I think they should be winning them by more. I would still, even in closing these games out, I still would expect the other team to come back. I don't think you're going to have, 6 to 40 scores and those things. I don't think that's really where Texas is at right now. But I do think you could win these games 38 to. This text says, I think we have overperformed. We continue to take our foot off the gas, lose all momentum, and we're lucky to hang on. The good news is we can compete with anybody. We don't let up. The key is, as we saw with OU, to have the ball last. Don't score with more than a minute on the clock. Yeah, that's somewhat is in a lot of teams and a lot of things in football now where just the way the game is called, it seems to be a lot easier to get the ball downfield. It's easier to get that pass interference. It's easier to get that shot downfield. And offensive pass interference is not called in it. I mean, if you remember that West Virginia-Houston game earlier in the year, that was completely nuts at the end of the game. But yeah, I appreciate you, first-time texter. I appreciate that. But yeah, I think we have – I think we're either on track or overperformed so far this season. I know it hasn't always looked like it, but wins are wins. And would you rather say we're 8-2 right now, and we dominated 8 games and blew 2, and we were dominated in 2? Or would you rather have the season we're having? I think you'd rather say, well, every game was kind of close, and we had a couple blowouts in there. We had a couple games. You had Baylor, and you had BYU. You had some games that were kind of, you handled your business in, and some others you didn't. But I'd rather have that than one more loss and like 4 more blowouts. I don't want that one more loss. I get everybody wants whatever, the top of the line, but I don't know if that's always there. Lucas, did anyone ask Sark about the 4th down attempts? He's been asked plenty of times about him. He was actually asked about the nice way he was asked about it this week was he was asked if Brett Auburn being able to kick field goals and hit field goals makes him more likely to do it. He said not really, but I think he does know. I think he knows that he is not being able to do. He keeps saying the same phrase, which he keeps saying, be able to run the ball when the other team knows we are. And it's just this really, I can't stand it at this point in the season because of how many times he's run into a brick wall and then wondered why we weren't able to push a brick wall over. You're like, well, there's 8 of them and 5 of you. That's it. You're just going to lose that. You have to be smarter than that. You're being stubborn at that point. This texter says, prior to Brooks getting injured, I would say that you could compete in the playoff. Now I'm not sure. You also said they're performing about as I expected, predicted 11-1 this season. I didn't think they'd lose to either Alabama or Oklahoma. I figured we'd have another road game loss. Hoping that I'm wrong on that now. Beat ISU. Yeah, and I think losing Brooks, we're going to see how much of an impact that is. It's going to be a big impact. We'll see how much against Iowa State. But, yeah, you're going to have to throw the ball in Iowa State as well. And, you're just going to have to be able to do it. So we'll see if this now opens up the run game, if they back off because people were worried about Jonathan Brooks, and maybe they back off and allows a C.J. Baxter and a Jaden Blue to get some explosive plays out of the backfield. It makes it a little bit harder in the passing game. or if they line up to completely try and shut down this passing game, and it means Quinn is going to be able to go over the top on them. This text says, I think they can compete, especially if they have time to prepare. Yes, and you would. If you went to the college football playoff, you would. Confucius say, he who keep hand in pocket. I can't read that. Come on, guys. You can't read those important, terrible things in there. My man Chan says, met expectations if and only if they make the Big 12 championship game. However, made too many close shave games. The fact they haven't gotten the short yardage, red zone, secondary communication, secondary coverage resolved is a concern. There's plenty of concerns, and I think every one of these teams would. I think if you follow any one of these teams, they will. You start to see the problems. You start to see where the issues are, and then in reality, these teams start to get away with it. Also, none of these coaches are getting fired in the Big 12 right now. No one's, there's some other conferences where it seems to be a little bit more tumultuous. But I think the Big 12's kind of in the holding pattern of Texas and Oklahoma are leaving. They're going to be doing their new thing. It just seems like a weird kind of season for Big 12 that no one's going to lay off the quit. But that's partially what I talked about earlier. Sark has to put his foot on the throat at halftime and come out of the half and go aggressive after the half. Go to attack the quarterback on the defensive end. Go attack downfield. Run, don't keep settling for just holding on to the ball. You have to take some risk in that second half to shut down this team. If you're going to let them in one way or the other, might as well take some risk and go for it. And I appreciate my man Chief Engineer asking the YouTube handle that we're talking about that is back that at the Horn Austin. At the Horn Austin, I believe, is where you'll be able to find us. Let me look on my phone one more time because I get this wrong and I'm not good at these things. At the Horn Austin. At the Horn Austin is where you want to be to find all of our YouTube, and you can come see my very white with light face on the YouTube stream in our new studios. But appreciate you guys. All right. So texts are still coming in. We're going to read some more of those texts. 512-447-3776. We try to get to everybody's text before we get off the air. We really do. I promise we always try to. So we'll try and get to that as well. But I do want to bring up a couple things that have happened in the news. If you watched the Monday Night Football last night, I feel sorry for you. I watched pieces of it. I did not watch it all. I went and walked my dog, and I felt like it was a better use of my time than watching the Broncos and the Bills. We can say the Broncos now have won their last 3 straight. Russell Wilson's playing a little bit better. Sean Payton seems like he's starting to affect his change. The complete dread and horror for Denver Broncos fans and the Denver Broncos people, the staff who had spent so much money, is maybe waning a bit as they get the win 24-22 over the Bills on Monday night. Then maybe there's a little bit more hope. There's going to be those games that were give me games for teams like the Texans playing the Broncos. Those now become different games. They're playing the Vikings next week. The Broncos are. If the Broncos beat the Vikings, this is all of a sudden that Broncos team is right back in the thick of, okay, this is not a dead team. This is not the worst team in football. So Sean Payton, as much as he was getting a lot of crap early in the season, I do think he bit off more than he could chew. I think he wasn't prepared for how crazy it was going to be. I don't think he knew how insane it was going to be to get to where he needed to be. I don't think he knew how far the gap was, and he thought he could do it a little bit easier, but he's getting there. So I'll give him credit on that one. The Bills, on the other hand, this is something that we've talked about over the last couple of years. I mentioned that I don't know how much longer Sean McDermott can stay there in Buffalo, and I don't like to be part of the media that is on the just fire the coach. But once you get through a certain amount of time with the head coach and he's not able to get over that hump, and then you start to slide back down the hill, that's where it feels like the Buffalo Bills are right now. They're 5-5. The defense is, instead of getting better, getting more aggressive. And those two are not necessarily the same thing. They're going for a lot of plays, and they're getting beat over the top. They're getting beat behind. And so they fire Ken Dorsey. He kind of came up as a quarterback's coach and everything with the Buffalo Bills, moved all up. He gets the axe, and this is mainly because one of Brian Daboll's great accomplishments when he was the offensive coordinator with the Bills was that Brian Daboll was able to get Josh Allen to limit his interceptions and limit his turnovers. whether that's working with Josh Allen on what he's seeing, whether it's going through film every week with Josh Allen and really working on that, whether it's designing plays where he gives him less of a shot. And how many times in a Brian Daboll offense you watch Gabe Davis break wide open? Now, trading for Stephon Diggs was huge, but Diggs is still there, and he's throwing these interceptions. So something had to change. Joe Brady gets his second shot as the offensive coordinator. Joe Brady, if you remember, was the offensive coordinator of that LSU team where a lot of people said Ed Orgeron wasn't doing as much, that he was, that he may not have been the guy, defensive coach. And then Joe Brady gets that job at the Panthers. That's where he decided to go and gets basically thrown under the bus by Matt Rule in that situation. So now we're coming in for a guy who got thrown on the bus for Sean McDermott's mess. And Joe Brady gets his second shot. We will see if Joe Brady has the ability to do anything, or if it was just that, in reality, that LSU team had Joe Burrow, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. They had Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, which is insane. If an NFL team had that LSU lineup now, they probably wouldn't love Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But other than that passing game would be electric. So we don't know how much of it's Joe Brady, how much of it was Joe Burrow, Justin Jefferson, and Jamar Chase. But we do know that that's the way, and we'll see if the Bills are able to kind of corral Josh Allen to still be a great player, but then you just get him a little bit further back. Get him corralled back to not have as many turnovers, because the turnovers for these Bills team is through the roof. It is a problem. For Cowboys news, Leighton Vander Esch, it was said today that his season, he will not return this season from injury. The injury is worse than thought. His recovery is not going the way, and there is some talk that he may not even play football ever again, that this may be a career-ending injury for Leighton Vander Esch. So it is an issue for Cowboys fans. This is a depth issue. You've been doing okay without him in the interim, so you're going to have to keep filling in that hole. But a big shot for the Cowboys today when Leighton Vander Esch was diagnosed with not being able to come back this season. Going over to the NBA. There is a matchup in the NBA, which is going to start here in about 10 minutes. That it's on TNT, so if you want to watch this game, it's going to be a matchup that most media and everybody's looking at it as this could be a matchup that will be a generational matchup for the next decade plus. Spurs versus Thunder, Wemby versus Holmgren. I want to give you how close their stats are so far this season. And right now, I'll be honest, Ausar Thomas up there in Detroit may actually be winning this Rookie of the Year competition. He is putting up crazy numbers. He looks really good with Monty Williams, but we'll see how that continues. We're 10 games in, so both Wembanyama and Chet Holmgren have played 10 games this season. Holmgren is at 16.4 points per game. Wemby is at 19.7. When we get into the rebounds, Holmgren has 7.6. Wemby has 8.8. So we're getting a little closer. Then when it gets really crazy, the 2.6 to 2.5 assists for two of them, 0.9 steals per game for 1.1 steals per game, 2.3 blocks per game for the 2.4 blocks per game. Just crazy similar stats between these two guys. Now, your biggest difference are going to be two things. One, Holmgren is shooting the ball at a much higher clip. He is shooting at 54% to Wemby's 44%. So that's a big difference right there. And also, SGA and Giddey are on this Oklahoma City team, and that is going to put him in a better position where he doesn't have to be the guy, whereas in San Antonio, he's kind of being put in that position, especially when Vassell went down with injury, and Keldon Johnson can do some big things, but I don't know if he's that guy either. So Wemby has to be the guy, which means he's taking some more shots, and at points they're not going down. When teams are playing pretty physical with him, teams with defensive-minded head coaches that are going to get in there and try and get in his grill, he's having a little bit more trouble in those games so far this season. That'll come with time to learn how to play through it. They were showing footage of Manu Ginobili working with him in practice. But you can see this Texas team the Spurs team is going to continue to grow with Wemby around it. The problem that we're finding, Trey Jones has had some injuries. Devin Vassell has had some injuries. This team is not very deep. They have a lot of players, but they're not players that can carry the game when the stars are on the bench. So when Vassell is on the bench and Wemby's on the bench and Keldon's on the bench, there's guys that the passing the ball slows down, the shot percentage goes down, and the defense goes way, way, way down. So they're taking not great shots. The ball's coming back down on the other end, and they're just not able to compete at that level. So it's it's still going to be a work in progress for the Spurs. They've gotten blown out in some of these games where when the starting lineup isn't able to get in the lead and the starting lineup gets down, by the time the bench comes in, it's just out of reach, and the Spurs bench doesn't have the depth. But it'll be a fun game tonight against the Thunder, who are a few years ahead of the Spurs. Again, when they have SGA, who they traded for, they have Giddey on this team. Lou Dort is a really good player, a defensive player on this team as well, going to be going up against Devin Vassell. That'll be a fun matchup to watch. But Wemby versus Holmgren, it's going to be good TV to watch. This is the first regular season matchup of the two. They match up in preseason. It was a lot of fun to watch. This will be the first regular season matchup of the two. I recommend tuning in. It's at 6:30 today on TNT. The game following that will be Clippers and Nuggets, which we get to see that the Clippers have not won a game. They're 0-5 since trading for James Harden. Everybody is freaking out. I don't know if it's going to be the end of the world, but it is going to be a problem that having two ball stoppers in Westbrook and Harden that both like to initiate and can both do good things, but both of them kind of doing the same thing and not necessarily wanting to play hard defense. The steals category being the biggest misnomer in NBA. It's the most annoying category in the NBA for people who think that guys who have a lot of steals are really good defensive players. They're usually really lazy NBA defensive players because they don't want to square up. They don't just want to play basketball face straight at the basket. They don't want to get in defensive stance and fight it out. They want to jump lanes and go try and play offense again. It's a really misnomer category that a lot of guys will go, that's a great, like Allen Iverson has a lot of steals. It's not because he was a great defensive player. It was because he wanted to play offense so bad that he would take the ball back. Now, there's pluses to that, but also if you have 3 steals in the game and allowed 40 points, you know, it's not evening out. It's not evening out. Also tonight, Mavericks and Pelicans are playing. Mavericks are 8-2 so far in the season. Doncic, 32 points per game, 8.4 rebounds, 8.5 assists per game, is just dominating right now. But the big thing that's happening for the Mavs this season was an offseason acquisition of Grant Williams. He's shooting 50% from 3. That right there, if you get a tough guy who wants to play defense for Jason Kidd, can step in there, what they wanted Maxi Kleber to be last year, but you got a much better version of that in Grant Williams, shooting 50% from 3. Now, if you can add that in with Derek Lively continuing to progress, and then it's just, can Luka Doncic stay in there, and can his usage rate, can you find ways to get Kyrie a little bit more involved in part of the season and let Luka get a few more minutes rest to keep him healthy and keep him pushing throughout the season? That, I think, is going to be a big part for this Mavericks team as the season goes on, if you want to be able to compete in the postseason and continue to go on. But right now, this Mavericks team looks really good, and a big part of it is the guys they acquired, Derek Lively and Grant Williams, those other pieces for their starting lineup, are playing at a really high level right now. I think they may try and go out and try and get somebody else, because if you want to say Luka and Kyrie and Grant and Derek Lively look really good, I feel like you may need that one last piece in there, a veteran piece, may be able to come in and help out there. I don't know who it is yet. That'll be middle of the season when you see that acquisition being made, but I could see them trying to sign somebody or bring somebody in who may be able to fill that role. Reggie Bullock is a guy who's on this team before, may come in and be able to find him and get him back. That would be a big acquisition for the Mavs. There's some NBA talk for you, too. Text line's still open, 512-447-3776. I want to get back to the text line when we come back from break, right here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com, and back on YouTube. Back at the Sports Complex on a Tuesday afternoon, playing interesting covers all week long. This is the band Steel Panther, who I've seen live many times, doing Backstreet Boys, I Want It That Way. Good stuff right there. They're not all bad. I like this cover of that song. I prefer it to Backstreet Boys, but that's just me. That's just me. Text line's open, 512-447-3776. If you guys want to chime in, got anything else you want to hit before we get to the end of the show today? By the way, college football playoff rankings normally coming out during the show. They're coming out after the show today because there's college basketball on ESPN. So normally when they would do the show, there's a big college basketball. Right now is Duke and Michigan State playing. I believe they're tied up right now. So that is happening at between the two games. So around 8 o'clock tonight, we will get the new college football playoff rankings. I don't believe anybody in Texas has any hopes of moving up any more than 6. You may drop down. The debate with Alabama is raging. Alabama fans are upset that Texas is not winning close, and Alabama's doing everything great, and there's no reason why Alabama shouldn't be the number 1 team in the country. You just tell Alabama fans. This is simple. You beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. You're good. You'll pass Texas then. That's easy. You beat Georgia, you pass Texas. Like that, that's a no-brainer. So that's all you got to do. We don't need to debate this. We don't need to worry about that as much. For Texas, they don't have as lucky because they just don't. Texas is unfortunately not in a position to have another big game this season where they're going to be able to move up in that ranking and have that big one. Alabama has it. You're good to go. If Georgia wins out, you went out, you go play, then there's a good chance you could have 2 SEC teams in there. Be better than Ohio State. I know I've beaten this drum enough, but I do not believe Ohio State is near the top best team in the country. I think they have a lot of political pull. They're pulling some BS. They beat a Penn State team that once again lost to Michigan. Not a shocker. That Notre Dame team that has lost a few games now. That's their 2 big wins. If they lose to Michigan, I don't think they should be in the college football playoff. That's just me. I think there should be one Big Ten team in there because that conference is not that great. I'd say one Big Ten team gets in, but Ohio State's probably going to find a way to campaign their way in and then lose again. Let's take a spot from somebody else who deserves it more. This texter says, Texas is this year's TCU. They're finding ways to win games, but they're really not going to compete except for maybe an exceptional game in the playoff. Most likely someone will step up and knock them out pretty good. I get the thing. Again, TCU was comebacks. Texas is ahead and not closing out games. There is a pretty big difference. And I know it doesn't seem like it, but you like to be able to play really great in the fourth quarter because that's what everybody sees last. You want to finish strong. But Texas is actually playing pretty good games, and they played everybody to them. They played everybody. They haven't played anybody where they are the ones down and getting beat. TCU had to come back a lot. It ran out against K-State in the Big 12 championship game. You don't want to see that for Texas either. Texas is who we thought they were, and they let us off the hook. Good stuff there from, I believe it was Dennis Green, right? Dennis Green? Does the Brooks loss make Sark more aggressive with Quinn and ultimately help keep the foot on the gas? The question there is, Texter, I will say I think it depends on Quinn's arm health because I don't know how healthy Quinn's arm is. It did not look like it was healthy in the second half of that game last night. Chan asking, is that a fridge to your back left? Yes, there is a fridge here in the studio now. We have a little mini fridge back there. But yes, we do. Do we hire Dave Aranda if he's let go from Baylor? I do not believe so. I think Dave Aranda would go somewhere else. And also he would be, I don't think Pete Kwiatkowski is going anywhere right now. This Texas defense does still have its strong points. You getting the recruits, as long as you're still getting those top recruits, I don't know if you need to change coaching. I know it's a fun, clever thing to do, but it doesn't always work. So I think that if you've seen what Sark is doing, then I don't know if he seems like he's sticking by his guys. So unless PK leaves and like USC hires PK, then maybe you have that conversation. If there's an opening, you may take it, but I don't know if any of that's going to happen. Same old take. Opening script is usually really successful, but we can't pause, or possibly worse, won't make aggressive halftime adjustments like most of our opponents' coaches continue to do. And what the hell is on that halftime locker room playlist? No, that's the thing. They do make halftime adjustments. They just make crappy ones. Thank you, Ram Texter number 69. They make crappy ones. He said in the postgame that I just wanted to run the ball in the second half. I wanted to run the ball. I didn't want to turn it over. I wanted to run the ball. And it didn't work. And now it may have worked better if Jonathan Brooks was still in there, but it didn't work. damn it, people, we're in perfect 9-1 with an upward trajectory, long way from what we have endured since 09. Hook 'em, CBA. Scott, that's what I'm saying. For me, if you said before the season that this is where we'd be at, I'd say we'd be doing pretty good. I'm not happy about the last couple games and how they finished either, but I'd be pretty happy with where we're at. And chief engineer to Alabama fans, something you lost the game head to head. I agree, but if you beat Georgia, you're ahead of us. That's just the way, because then you beat Georgia. And in my mind, if anybody beats Georgia, Brock Bowers is back now. Came back, didn't sit out the rest of the season. Came back, is playing again. If you beat Georgia right now, how about I hand it to you? Texas, you're playing great football. I'll give it to you. If you beat Georgia, I don't think you're gonna. If you do, you're good to go. I do want to play some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Rob B. Text line still open, 512-447-3776. If you got any last words you want to put in there, I want to play some sound from Hook 'em Up, though, real quick. Talking some Dallas Cowboys, Rob Babers breaks down some of what the Texas Coast offense evolution is from Hook 'em Up this morning.
All right, let's get into the Dallas Cowboys just a little bit, because the last 3 or 4 games since the bye week, the Cowboys have really hit their stride offensively. I mean, they outgained the Giants by 468 yards. That was the largest total yardage difference in an NFL game in 44 years. Yeah, 44 years. Really long time since a team whipped a team that thoroughly. And the Cowboys, we talked about how antiquated the Texas Coast offense looked prior to the bye week. That they just didn't have a really modern feel to it. There were a lot of things that was lacking, like, pre-snap motion, bunch formations. These are things that Longhorn fans know all about, because I bring them up all the time, because I track them for Texas's offense. But they're just modern cheat codes. And I always say this about Sark's offense. Sark offense is just an amalgamation of cheat codes. It's a gumbo of cheat codes and force multipliers. And what Sark likes to do is basically Sark likes to combine them all together, throw as many cheat codes and force multipliers in one play as possible, and almost overload the circuitry, overload the central nervous system of a defense, force them to make a mistake. So he'll use pre-snap motion, and then that's the play action pass thrown in there, and some misdirection with the bunch formations, and it's a lot for the defense to process. That's what he's trying to do, and it makes sense. The Cowboys were lacking a lot of those just modern cheat codes within their offense, and I brought that up during the bye week, and one of my suggestions was, hey, man, y'all need to use more cheat codes. I don't know exactly how much it will improve the Texas Coast offense, but I said you got to use more pre-snap motion. You got to use more bunch formations. These are simple things. Texas has a tough time defending bunch formations. Why? Because you cannot reroute and redirect wide receivers. It forces you to play on your heels as a DB. You can't be aggressive, otherwise you're going to get picked or rubbed. All right, so you got to play off, and you have to read and react to routes rather than redirect and rather than reroute. And that's tough, because a DB, if you react too late, guy's open. So you basically automatically have to give the receiver space. It creates an easy, free release for the wide receiver. Cowboys weren't doing that. It's like, why are you making the receivers work harder instead of working smarter? So the Cowboys ranked 25th in bunch formation rate and 3-by-1 formation rate. That's trips to one side, single receiver to the other side prior to the bye week. Since the bye week, so we talked about they had to modernize that offense. They ranked 13th in bunch formation. So from 25th to 13th, and since the bye week, they also ranked 15th in 3-by-1 sets, and they were 25th prior to the bye week. So it's getting better. All right, they're starting to use more and more modernized formations, modernized sets, just easy cheat codes. Pre-snap motions and shifts. We talked about this. They were middle of the road. And if you look at motion at the snap, they were actually bottom of the league in motion at the snap. They were ranked 14th in pre-snap motions and shift prior to that bye week. Since the bye week, the Cowboys ranked 8th or top 10 in shift and motion rate. Prior to the bye week, like I said, they were 14th. The Cowboys offense now, it's not a coincidence. Now, I'm not saying that this was the only reason that the Cowboys offense improved. No, it improved for, I think, a number of reasons. That's one of them, though. They are modernizing the offense more. And also part of that rant prior to the bye week, I said, listen, they got to start, force feeding the football to CeeDee Lamb. And they're doing that with these concepts. When they run 3-by-1 sets, they're basically putting CeeDee Lamb on the single receiver side, forcing the defense to go, okay, you want to double what right now is a receiver playing like the best receiver in football? Because that would make sense. Do you have a cornerback that can play man-to-man up against CeeDee Lamb? If you do, then great, good for you. You must have an all-pro corner. But if you don't have an all-pro corner, then CeeDee Lamb is going to eat that DB alive, whoever he is, because they got a lot of space to work with in those 3-by-1 sets. CeeDee Lamb last 3 games, 34 receptions, 500 receiving yards, 4 total touchdowns, 17 receptions for 15-plus yards. Remember, around the bye week, he's complaining. I need the ball more. I'm open. And remember, I came on and boom, I essentially retweeted that. I quote tweeted that. I second that emotion from CeeDee Lamb and said, you got to give him the ball more. All the metrics say CeeDee Lamb is playing like an all-pro wide receiver. And right now, only A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill, you probably could say, are better right now at the wide receiver position in the NFL, and he's giving them a run for their money. He's the only receiver in NFL history now with at least 10 catches and 150 receiving yards in 3 straight games. The last 3 games since they've modernized the offense, and you're seeing that big Dak energy, and Dak playing like one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. And so when they go 3-by-1, you got to make your choice, right? It's you pick your poison. You want to double CeeDee Lamb, then they're going to win the numbers advantage on the trip side. Well, you can roll your coverage, and you can, obviously win the numbers advantage with the trips and try to be 4-on-3 over there, all right? 4 defenders to their 3 wide receivers, but then you're going to lose the numbers advantage on the CeeDee Lamb side, and your guy's going to be 1-on-1, and CeeDee Lamb is going to feast. Over the last 4 games, 41 receptions, 51 targets, 620 yards, and 27 first downs. He's 6 of 7 on contested catches. 3.88 yards per route run, and 22 plays of 15-plus yards over the last 4 games. It's unbelievable. And going to get to my point about when he's left in man coverage, how about this? Dak Prescott, in that last game versus the Giants, he was 12 of 18 against man coverage for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Cowboys are now forcing teams, all right, to manipulating matchups, I say, and forcing teams to play CeeDee Lamb man-to-man, or you can double him. And that's why right now Dak Prescott leads the NFL in NFL in yards and touchdown passes and passer rating and success rate versus man coverage, because they're manipulating matchups now across the board. I love what they're doing with the modernized concepts. Like I said, we weren't seeing this, and I was thinking to myself, I'm watching the Cowboys offense and thinking to myself, the Texas Coast offense is a 1980s offense. But now it looks like a 21st century offense. Going back to the pre-snap motion stuff versus San Fran, they had 39% pre-snap motion rate. Against the Giants, it was at 61%. So they figured it out. He's figuring out, okay, you know what? Just throw cheat codes in the offense, and it'll help everybody. The run game is next to try to infuse some juice into the run game. But I'm not going to say fix the passing offense, but right now the passing offense is looking like one of the more explosive passing offenses in the NFL. It's because they finally modernized it, and they got out of the antiquated Texas Coast version of that offense.
Yeah, well, and good analysis by you to see what needed to happen, and now they need to get the run game going.
They do.
Because as we talked about with Tony Romo declaring the Lions a Super Bowl contender. Now, when the Lions get rolling, their offense is as good as anybody's, because they got David Montgomery back last week, Rod, to go with Jahmyr Gibbs, and they both scored touchdowns. Mm-hmm. It was impressive what they do offensively. Now, Brandon Staley needs to be fired with the Chargers because they got destroyed.
It's time.
Anytime they match up with a versatile offense, they get wiped out.
Yep.
They've got a lot of talent on that Chargers defense. So the Lions are good, but their defense is also susceptible still to a shootout like we saw. Niners, really good. When they're complete, and then there's the Eagles, who we'll see coming off their bye week. Question there is, how healthy can Jalen Hurts get this year, right? Yep. With that knee.
Agreed.
But man, it's those 4. It's those 4 in the NFC. One of those. Is there any doubt one of those 4 will be in the Super Bowl this year? I mean, I don't think there's another team that you can even argue
that's
for.
That's what I put my money on. Yeah, I don't think there's another team that right now even crosses my mind that could do it. It would be a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're and the Niners might be a notch above, but as we know with them, it's about health, big picture. I mean, can they stay healthy? If they keep everybody together, they are the team, especially with the acquisition of Chase Young to play opposite Bosa and rush the passer with that talent on defense. They're going to be tough. But Cowboys, again, if they improve the running game, I don't know if that's possible at this point, but if they can, they certainly can be in that conversation because. But here's the problem for teams. This is one of the things I think Romo was kind of bullish on in that division. If they keep piling up wins, Rod, they're going to have home field, and you're going to have to go through Detroit potentially.
That would be crazy,
right?
I can't even imagine that.
Because I think most people expect the Vikings will fade with this Josh Dobbs thing at some point. It's been an amazing run with Kevin O'Connell, but they'll fade.
Yeah, that's no staying
And
power.
so now you have a division that includes the Vikings, the Bears, and the and Packers, who are not good. Whereas, the Niners are going to be in the dogfight with the Seahawks.
Oh, yeah.
Kyler Murray's now back for Arizona. Cowboys have to deal with Philadelphia. So that home field thing, because they're sitting at 7-2. The Detroit Lions, Eagles are 8-1. So that'll be something to follow here November into December, and who gets that top seed in the NFC.
Good stuff there from Hooker Up with Ian Rob B. We got to take our last break of the show. We back to wrap things up here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us today on the show. Appreciate everybody on the text line. You guys always drive the show. I just try to keep it on the rails. You guys awesome on there as always. We'll be back tomorrow. Start to get ready for Iowa State. See how this Wimby versus Holmgren duel goes for the rest of the game. We'll see what else happens in the NBA and college basketball. Texas women's basketball plays today. Texas men's basketball plays tomorrow. So we'll talk about both those games tomorrow as well. But until then, be kind, be safe, keep your underwear clean, and we will see you right back here tomorrow, 5 o'clock, on the Sports Complex on the Horn.